Yo, what's up everybody? Thanks for joining me again for another episode of the House of Salt, the show where we talk about video games, game design, and the games industry as a whole. My name's Bao, and today we're going to be discussing the scariness that is how to prepare for your interview. So keep in mind, this approach is still pretty specific with regards to game design. However, there's still going to be plenty of overlap with regards to like best practices and approaches with other disciplines as well. So one pretty important bit of information that I did want to bring up before we go too far, which will not only help you prepare for a potential position, but will also give you a better idea of how to focus your initial efforts. And that is, while game designer, the title, is a general job description that is used throughout the industry, it is actually often broken up into more specific roles, each with their own set of skills and expertise associated with them. So some of the different examples of the different potential type of designers that are out there are ones such as level designers, AI designers, systems designers, narrative, characters, quest, mission, bosses, NPCs, and there's more out there. So some of these positions may even have different or more nuanced job descriptions depending on which company you're at. For example, a systems designer on one company may mean actually something completely different at another. And funny enough, some of these titles can actually be shared by other disciplines, but mean something completely different. Things such as a technical designer or a character designer or a level designer may actually mean something completely different and be a part of a completely different discipline, depending on which company you're at. All that being said, depending on the scope of the project as well as the size of your team, you'll still often be finding yourself working on multiple different aspects of design. This is particularly true on like smaller projects or smaller teams. But to be honest, learning and broadening your skill set will not only present you with more options and opportunities throughout your career, but will also help you hone your existing skills as well and make you a more efficient and well-rounded designer. As a side note, this is actually why it is so important to actively work and collaborate with the other disciplines on your team. So not only is everybody on the same page, but you also have a better understanding of the process overall and can make better design decisions based on that. This is actually a really important topic, so we'll be touching on this on another episode. So if you're wondering about where you should start or what type of designer you want to be, you may consider looking up existing job descriptions at some of the prominent studios and kind of get a sense of what their role is throughout the projects, and that'll also help to inform you on what kind of skills or training you should be focusing on. So interviewing at pretty much any company can be one of the most nerve-wracking, nail-biting, like stuttering, deer-in-the-headlight experiences of all time. This is actually even especially so if you're at a company that you're super fanboy over. That being said, I'm going to go over a few things which will help you prepare for this craziness and hopefully nail that interview. When applying for a position at a company, not only should you be well versed and familiar with that position itself, but you should also be as familiar as possible with the company as well as their products. So a pretty standard interview practice often involves asking you questions about the company's previous titles. Some examples of this are like, are you familiar with the titles that they make in this company? Do you enjoy those types of games? What do you like about a specific title? Often this is regards to their most recent title that they made. What did you dislike? And also a common one is, what would you bring to the team if we were to bring you on? So if you are ever asked what you didn't like about a particular title, a pretty standard follow-up question to this is, what would you do to improve that and why? So this can actually be a pretty important question, as oftentimes the interviewers are actually trying to get several different bits of information from you from this one interaction. In particular, it could be elements such as, what is your creative process like? How do you do under pressure? How creative are you overall? And do you understand the title? And etc. There's lots of different things they can glean from this. So to avoid getting caught off guard, plan ahead and actually go through their previous titles as well as similar titles, and actually think of several different potential examples. In addition, if someone asks you what some of your favorite games are, there's a good chance they may ask you the same question about one of them as well. With that in mind, this is actually a real skill that you'll need to cultivate in general. Being able to break down systems and mechanics and figure out how to actually potentially improve upon them is a pretty crucial skill for designers. We all know that interviews with companies can be pretty stressful in general, like especially if you're not used to the process. In addition, different companies may actually have different interviewing procedures as well, so it can be difficult to try to prepare for all potential scenarios. One thing that will definitely help your chances is by establishing and maintaining not only confidence, but a good attitude throughout the interview. This is easier said than done, of course, but overall, it'll have a huge impact on your first impression with the team. So the people who are actively interviewing you will often be a part of the team that you may be working with if you're hired. And having like a timid or a negative attitude may actually make it more difficult to see you as a potential coworker. So throughout the course of an interview, you may get caught off guard by a line of questioning or not understand a question or something, but do your best to try to not let it get to you, and definitely don't try to BS your way out of it. They may immediately call you out, or they'll make a note of it, and overall that'll hurt your chances in the long run. So instead, just take a deep breath, think about it for a sec, and if you need clarification or more details on it, then ask. Or if you flat out don't know, then one other option is to actually be upfront about it. But even then, still be positive. Having a positive disposition as well as an eager attitude will go a long way. Oftentimes when companies are hiring on newer talent, they're not only looking for someone that can just do the job, but they're looking for someone who's hungry for opportunity and is willing to put forth that effort. So be that type of person. While confidence is awesome and is really important, be careful not to take it too far and keep that ego in check. As I mentioned before, these are some people who you may be working with, so acting like during your interview is more than likely not going to help your chances. This is actually a pretty important topic, so we're going to circle back to this again on a later episode. So importantly, at some point throughout the interview, typically towards the end, they may ask you if you have any questions for them. I would highly suggest taking this opportunity to find out a little bit more about not only the project, but the team and the company as well. So this could include details about the tools they use, opportunities for advancements, details about benefits, team morale, etc., whatever your interests are. This not only shows them that you've got interest in the prospective project and the company, but it also gives you an opportunity to judge their responses as well. Remember, you're assessing them just as much as they're assessing you. Now, you guys are trying to ensure a proper fit here. I do understand that you may not have the luxury of turning down a potential role at a company, especially if this is your first gig, but it still should be a consideration. So as crazy and stressful as an interview can be, one surefire way to help prepare for it is by practicing. And by that I mean recruit a friend, like a neighbor or family member or something, or whoever's available, and ask if they can help you prepare by running you through some mock interviews. So to do this, have them prepare a list of potential questions for you and make sure they include some curveballs or crazy questions, just to make sure they're keeping you on your toes. So once they're done, just take the list and keep drilling and drilling until you start to get more comfortable overall with the process. And I know it may not exactly recreate the experience, but it'll help you get into the proper mindset of hearing a question, formulating your answer, and then be able to answer succinctly. So surprisingly enough, interviews can honestly be a great way to practice your communication skills, which is something we'll be covering in a subsequent episode as well. So one thing to keep in mind when you're applying to prospective companies is to make sure you're working with what you've got. So as I've mentioned before, there's actually a pretty good chance your first spot will not be at a huge company or maybe working on a AAA title. That being said though, any potential company is actually a great opportunity for you to start learning and expanding your skill sets. So try not to be discouraged if you don't get your dream spot right away. As a matter of fact, earlier in my career, I'd actually mentioned one of the first titles that I'd worked on, and someone actually tried to troll me by saying well, how does it feel to work on one of the worst games ever made? And I actually thought about it for a second and I replied, well, it still feels like I'm making video games, dude. So If you're lucky enough to be able to apply to multiple companies at the same time, one little trick that I would actually recommend is when you're setting up your interviews, identify which company is kind of highest on your list of where you'd actually want to work, and try to schedule that particular interview after you've had a couple of the other ones. Not only will this help you get more comfortable with the process overall, but it'll actually help you gain kind of a rhythm during your interviews, which will make it easier to kind of flow and answer questions. In addition, try not to schedule your interviews too closely together, as that actually runs the risk of fatiguing you or overwhelming you. All right, folks, I think that's going to do it for this episode of the House of Salt. I really hope this helps. There's still some more potential details for us to cover on this particular topic. So if you guys do want me to discuss it again, just let me know and we can circle back to this sometime in the future. And speaking of the future, our next episode is actually going to be covering one of the most important topics in the industry, which can honestly lead to projects and even companies rising or falling, which is communication. So that being said, if you know someone that's actually dreading an upcoming interview and you think that this can help, feel free to share, like, and subscribe. All right, guys, thanks again. We'll catch you again next time.